My name is Dakota Spencer from Bend, Oregon. Starting up here, you have the Ewok Village, which is turned into a Robin Hood fortress with a lot more foliage just because the set was not nearly enough. And you'll see that there's a lot of vegetation with all the bamboo leaves all around from the pick-a-brick walls at the Lego store.
Always take advantage of the pick-a-brick walls there.
Yeah, so you'll notice throughout the whole thing, there's a lot of random pick-a-brick pieces that don't have very many uses for, but they're incorporated just so I could use those kind of pieces and have a different kind of aspect on them, I guess. Sure. Let's see. The battlefield was pretty simple. It's honestly just kind of thrown together today. I haven't been able to put as much detail in this as I wanted to. But the trees, I have some of them from alt bricks for different colors, like the yellow and the different colors of orange and variations. But then there's also a lot of just the Lego ones as well. The waterfall was very challenging. I've never dealt with water with like the snot technique before, so that was very time-consuming. That was the last thing I actually built for this whole castle, was the waterfall.
You wouldn't think that kind of small portion of the whole thing would be that hard.
That was the most tricky thing, actually. It's crazy, yeah. Then you have the towers right here in front, kind of like the entryway. Kind of the cool technique about this guy is that when you take off these on the side, it's just those underneath. So it gives you that nice clean finish look on the sides.
Yeah, so you can just kind of pop the tile on there. Yeah.
Yeah, I also incorporated the stained glass window here inside, which is very hard to connect because it only has a base on the bottom to connect it to, which is like a flat, smooth surface. So to get it to stay in there sturdy is a challenge.
Yeah. So is that the one from the older kind of castle medieval set?
It's one of the first. I think it's like the second generation of castle sets they came out with. So yeah. Then also too, it's kind of cool feature is the window in here that's centered within what's inside of the frame. That was difficult. And the stained glass windows. That was a technique I found online actually by somebody. Yeah, and it's just a bunch of like the headlight bricks that are kind of staggered with a white plate behind them. Okay. Eventually I was planning to put some light source behind there so it kind of looked like they were flickering like candle lights or something like that. But yeah.
So how'd you decide on this water technique then? This is just kind of laying a slab of bricks on its side almost for this?
If you look closely, it's just a bunch of bricks on their side for the snot technique. Studs on top. And yeah, I want to do that in the back portion as well, but I didn't have enough bricks to do that. So this is where it kind of halted.
Sure.
I did a little bit of the interior right here. Not as in full detail as I wanted, but you have like a little armory there. It's supposed to be like a little house. This was also kind of neat. So these pieces here are just hinged on their side. So they're very ununiform for Lego, I guess you could say.
So very easy to move around like that,
yeah. Everything comes apart in like 15 by 15 plates, so it's really easy to transport except for this large section here. That part is one solid mass, and then that has to fit through like my Lego room door, and it's like a ½ inch of clearance on each side, so that's the tricky part. Everything else, though, is fairly simple to transport.
When you started on this kind of the big main castle section here, did you just build from the ground up, or how did that work?
So this part right here, actually, and right here was start to my brother's Christmas present about 3 years ago. That's why it's called Logan's Castle. And yeah, like it was that big, and then I kept adding and adding to it, and then it became my castle instead. So it was no longer his Christmas present. But yeah, I just kind of kept going from this start. This is actually from the very first time I started building. This is the main structure that is still standing. I haven't changed that whatsoever. So
yeah, that's very impressive then. Now I see a lot of, like you mentioned, all of the kind of grass, bamboo type pieces. Do you enjoy doing that type of building, or?
I do. I think vegetation is kind of like my thing. I like to make things very realistic from afar. Like if you were to glance at it, you wouldn't know if it was like a sculpted piece or if it was a brick made piece, you know? That's kind of what I wanted to go for. It was just a very natural looking kind of thing.
Very cool. So then moving back kind of behind the main castle wall here, I noticed right off you got like a church cathedral going on there.
Yeah, so the church cathedral has all of the cheese slopes on their side. It's also built at a slight angle, so it's hinged on the back, but to get the plate up top with the smooth seams was very challenging to get it to be kind of flawless like that. There's also the medieval village set that's kind of incorporated in here. I customized some of it, but I wanted to still bring in aspects of the castle theme to my kind of mock for it as well. Yeah. Like these are what I was talking about for some of the pick-a-brick pieces that you can never get enough of at the store, but never know what to use them for. So this is eventually all going to be with the cobblestone through here. Let's see. This portion from here back has been added on since BrickCon up in Seattle. This took me about 3 weeks to make, while this took me like 6 months. So this is definitely a time constraint, and just kind of really focusing in on how quickly I can build stuff, because I wanted to get it done for this convention. I would plan to do like full water with the 1x1 studs all across here to kind of give it some depth and some movement to it, kind of like what I did with the ship. But
I love that you got the old Viking ship in here. That's very cool.
And I guess it's not a set you see very often either, which I'm glad to have it. I have an extra one too. I'm planning on doing kind of like a whole armada here in the bay. So yeah.
Yeah. So obviously with this massive build and you do all this castle work here, what do you find is kind of, do you any tips for people looking to build more castle stuff in the future? Anything you found is like good techniques when building castle type builds?
I would say, saving bricks where you can. Even if you have a piece like this, which everybody has 1,000 of, if you were just to put a 2x2 brick or 2x1 brick straight up and down there, you can cover that window and that still looks like a solid wall. Right. You're going to save a ton of pieces using those big blurpy pieces that you have, as opposed to simple like bricks. Building it in sections too. I mean, that's key.
You can actually get it to show.
Yeah. And I would say just focusing on detail on one specific section. I mean, this wall alone took me about 2 weeks to get it just the way I wanted it, with the depth and the detail inside of that. But it's what sets it apart from like kind of rush through it, I feel like. So
yeah,
taking the time. And
something I noticed here is I like how you've got kind of the bridges or like arch sections here. Are those difficult to do, and what do you find is a good way to keep that supported so it's not falling down? If
you start with building the bridge first and then building the towers around it, that's kind of the best thing, because to get those angles in there, you have to figure that out before you can even attempt to go up higher, or you got to know how that's going to connect, figure that portion out, and then add it on. There was supposed to be another bridge where that tower starts over there. Supposed to be like a wizard's tower, which I haven't completed yet, but there's supposed to be an additional bridge that connects to that one too. So I kind of wanted to give it a look of a lot of depth, all the different bridges crisscrossing around.
Right, yeah. And then down here, I think we have one kind of final section inside the mountain here.
Yeah. So what's really tricky about this one, it's all actually built upside down. So I didn't have very many of these facing the opposite way, which I would have needed this way. So I built the whole structure upside down to use all of the roof tile slopes, I guess you could say. So it's kind of like a floating section. It all comes apart in small sections too, but it's very wobbly if it's not put together properly. Yeah, the windmill is also very challenging with all the slopes on their side, and the droid arms on there as well. If you go around the back, you can actually see how it's kind of built here. So I made it so the front, it's like a clean cut version, but on the back you can see clearly how it's like structured and built. So, because as a kid I always wanted to know, like, how do you get such big structures, like without wasting all your pieces? So I figured this is kind of like an insight to using Duplo bricks, or saving some pieces that way. So.
Sure. So generally see a lot of like Technic frames. You went all the way up to Duplo just because you had such a large area to fill.
I ran out of all my Technic frames way down there. So yeah, now I'm just down to my Duplo bricks. I'm out of those as well.
But yeah, use everything here. Look at it. You've got all sorts of pieces inside there. So yeah, you might as well. That works perfect. Just a few strong supports in there keeps that up fine.
Yeah. I also use the soccer fields underneath, just so I can slide these on top of there. So just the soccer fields on top, which is a smooth surface where you can transport those to stack them for height really quick, or saves up pieces there as well.
Yeah, when you're doing landscaping, I see you've got a few of the kind of the big rock pieces here. Yeah. Do you find that those aren't very useful as doing landscape just because they're so big, or you try to incorporate those generally?
They're actually used anywhere you see rock structure. Those are behind. Okay. I use those with the thought of making those how it's going to look, but I ended up covering them completely with bricks anyway. So they're a good structure to build off of and gives you a staggered kind of pattern, so it doesn't look too unnatural. So
sure.
Yeah.
So do you have plans to kind of expand this? I know you mentioned a couple areas you want to add stuff. Is there any more expanding it out?
I want to definitely finish the Wizard Tower and a couple other little areas, but after expanding, I don't think I can go much bigger than this. I'm very limited on my bricks now in space. So
when you have all this at like home, is it just kind of stacked in boxes, or how do you store all of this?
I actually have a private studio in Bend, so it accommodates this fairly well with like a big building area around. But this is like from one wall to the next now, so I can't really squeeze around. So this is kind of the max build that I can do currently. So
that works really nicely then. Well, thank you. I think it turned out amazing. I appreciate you taking us through the whole build. Thank you.
Appreciate it.